The supreme authority of the Incas was the Sapa Inca. He was considered the descendant of the sun god, and he ruled by divine right. And because he was a descendant of the sun god, subjects were not allowed to look him in the eye, and he was not allowed to walk as a mortal. He was carried around in a golden litter. And now the Sapa Inca had hundreds of women who served him as secondary wives, and these women came from the Akaluna, or chosen women group, of a group of women selected on the basis of beauty, skill, and social rank to serve as a priestess or attendant to the Sapa Inca. However, the empress, or the Koya, came from the ranks of the Sapa Inca's full sisters. So from the Koya's offspring, Sapa Inca selected his heir. Okay, the Koya had her own court and reputation for taking an unofficial but discreet role in imperial affairs. Below the Sapa Inca were the nobles, and these were the Capac Incas, who were Inca nobles by blood. These Capac Incas controlled land and valuable resources. They were leaders of the bureaucracy, the government, army, and priesthood. Okay? They also became the governors of the four quarters. What that means is that the empire was broken into 4 sections, so that there was a governor on each section that could report back to the Sapa Inca. Below the noblemen were the government officials. And to administer the vast empire, the Inca broke down the populace into decimal units. And so what that means is that every 10 households were governed by the head of one household. Thus, leaders reported to the heads of groups of 50 households. Above them were leaders of hundreds, 500s, thousands, 5,000s, 10,000 households. So at the bottom of the government official list were the leaders from conquered regions, and they continued to rule groups of households in their areas. Despite its size and complex organization, the Inca ruled the empire without the use of a written language, as the Mayans did. They developed a substitute for writing known as the quipu, and this is unique among human inventions and well suited to their needs. It consisted of knotted strings of cotton or wool, and I drew a little rough sketch of a quipu here. The system used to keep records of numbers of llamas, quantities of corn, the number of days commoners worked for the government, so each number would be a knot on this string. And they used a decimal counting system, and so the Inca placed the knots on a string to indicate their place value. For example, 1,705 llamas would have been recorded with 1 knot in the thousands place, 7 knots in the hundreds place, and no knot in the tens position, and a 5 loop knot in the ones positions. So that was their complex way of keeping track. As I mentioned in the government official slide, the Inca Empire was controlled by the households. So every 10 households governed by the head of one household who reported to the heads of other households. So what that means is you have 10 neighbors. Okay? One person on your block is in charge of all 10 of those houses. That one person then goes back to the other heads of 10 households. They get together, and then they go to the next set of rulers. Then they get together and go to the next set. So it's kind of this chain of people reporting events till it gets to the Sapa Inca. And this way, Inca controlled economies of diverse communities and were able to collect taxes more easily because they knew what was going on in each household. Throughout the empire, strict laws regulated the lives of commoners. The state demanded that everyone work and designated jobs for every man, woman, and child, starting at the age of 5. Imperial officials oversaw where people lived, what crops they grew, and how they dressed. In addition to working the lands that they owned, Commoners were required to work in the Inca fields, paid taxes that supported the empire's bureaucracy, priesthood, and other officials. Each household also had to work in state-run enterprises, and this might include spending a year in the army, or a month repairing local roads, or doing services such as in a ceramic shop. The Inca also demanded that people in diverse parts of the empire produced enough food for their community and for state needs. Commoners grew an enormous range of plants, producing corn, the most valued crop, as well as beans, squash, peanuts, cocoa, cotton, and quinoa, a highland grain, and potatoes, the potatoes, there were more than 200 varieties. When not planting, harvesting, or preparing, storing food, peasants, especially the women, spent time spinning and weaving cloth for the family's need and for the state's need. For their toil, commoners benefited from living in a stable state in which threat of warfare was diminished. A large portion of food that they produced went into storehouses to be used by the Inca to feed his administration and armies, as well as those paying labor tax to the state. The storehouses also kept tools, clothing, sandals, and other assorted goods for distribution to individuals associated with the state bureaucracy.